Hey everyone, this is Dr. Drizzle and welcome to the National Parks Expedition Challenge. Today we are at Cape Cod National Seashore right outside Provincetown, Massachusetts, and we are standing in front of the Cape Cod LifeSaving Station Museum. I have two brand new friends that I'm going to introduce you to today, Ranger Aleutia and Ranger Bill. Thank you guys so much for having us out here today. They look a little warmer than I do because they had their coats on, and we're here in October and it's pretty chilly, but we're so excited to be here. So before we get started in the history of this, let me let you tell the kids a little bit about your history, how you got to this National Seashore. So we'll start with you, Aleutia.
In 2000, I started an AmeriCorps internship at Golden Gate National Recreation Area, and I was working with the park hydrologist, and we were also doing a big habitat restoration project at Crissy Field. And I just fell in love with that intersection of being able to be immersed in the resources and managing the resources, but the public interface. We were working with volunteers and giving talks and working with school programs, and I loved it.
Nice. So you're hooked.
Yep.
So from there you went to?
From there, I went to Jean Lafitte National Historical Park and Preserve. It's a mouthful.
It is.
And I managed a big sort of salt marsh and cypress swamp site called Barataria Preserve, and then also a War of 1812 battlefield called Shellmat Battlefield.
And then you came here.
And then I came here.
Excellent. So Bill, what about you? So your history is a little bit longer?
Well, yeah, of course. Yes, I've worked for decades here at Cape Cod National Seashore. I did start out moving around for about 6 years at the beginning of my career as a seasonal ranger, working in a lot of Revolutionary War, colonial America sites, doing a lot of costume interpretation, and but fell in love with this place and have been here quite a while.
So you probably just didn't graduate high school and get here. So tell us about what your degree is.
My degree was in biology and marine science, and I went to school right in St. Petersburg Bay, near the Tampa Bay area of Florida. I grew up in Florida. And so that whole coastal estuarine ecology, that's it for me. Like, a lot of rangers would want to work at a majestic mountain park or a desert park. I like the coastal parks.
Nice. So your passion was that, and then you sort of intersected with your job. What about you, Bill?
Oh, well, my dad was a big history buff, so growing up I became a history buff, and so I got a bachelor and master's in history, and I wanted to be able to not teach history in a classroom, but to work in places where history happened and actually feel it and share that with the public.
So I love the whole idea of making that history come alive, and that's what you do for the kids and the public when they come here. So we are standing in front of the LifeSaving Station Museum. We'll just pass it back and forth, whoever wants to start, but what is this place and why is it here?
Okay, so this is the Old Harbor Life-Saving Station. So Cape Cod is a big arm in the Atlantic. We're way on the edge of the continent, and so there were a lot of shipwrecks that occurred because the arm of the Cape kind of got in the way of all those ships going up and down the coast. So this was one of 13 stations on the Cape, and it's one of the last surviving stations. So the National Park Service operates a museum here to tell the story of the lifesavers who went out to rescue the shipwreck victims, and the equipment and the technology that was required at that time, the best technology, to try to rescue people off these shipwrecks. And there were over 3,000 wrecks off the coast here. So it was one of the graveyards of the Atlantic, much like the Outer Banks in North Carolina is too.
So you talked about the equipment and the technology. So what would that have looked like? Because this is 1872?
Yeah, so this is the 1870s through the early 20th century when all these wrecks were happening. It was a big highway of shipping. These were sail-powered vessels for the most part. So the technology at that time to rescue people was you'd launch a large boat that would be rowed by 7 or 8 surfmen, and you'd literally row out and you'd get people off the ship and hopefully get them back to shore. And then the plan B, if it was really too rough to launch the boat, is you'd actually fire a line out and set up like a zip line to get people back. So that was the best and latest technology. But when we look at it today, it's kind of crazy what they were doing.
Well,
Yeah.
we know that zip lining connects to the Pythagorean theorem. So if you're a math person out there, you understand that you have to understand a squared plus b squared equals c squared to create a zip line. So they were really pretty far advanced in their work. So once they got them back to shore, what was their expertise there?
Well, they were trained in first aid. Again, the first aid of that period. But they knew how to get people who were unconscious to try to revive them and pump the water out of their lungs and then get them inside the station for a warm meal and dry clothes. So again, rudimentary by our standards, but you know, they were the EMTs of the day.
But it was also kind of a community experience because word would spread, even though there wasn't cell phones or whatever. People knew if there was a shipwreck, and they would cook food, come around and build fires. It was sort of anyone around, and also the families of the life-saving men who worked here would come and help out anytime a shipwreck happened.
So they were definitely volunteers. What about the actual men that worked here?
So the men who lived here, they lived here almost year-round. They had 2 months off in the summer, except for the head person, the keeper. And they were all usually from the local community. So they knew the shoreline, and they knew where the sandbars were, which could snag a ship. And they knew the conditions, and they knew how to handle small boats. They were usually fishermen in their past lives. So they were local people who then lived at the station and were ready. They'd patrol the beach every night looking for wrecks. And they had a lookout tower on most of the stations too. So they were constantly vigilant, especially during the stormy periods.
Well, so you said there were 13 stations, is that correct?
Yep.
So this one obviously is not on the water. So tell us a little bit about this one. Why is this one here?
Well, it's a little bit of a long story. So every station was about 5 miles apart. So you could do a walking patrol in between the stations. They weren't too spread out. This particular station was actually 30 miles south of here and was going to be washed away after it served its purpose as a station. It became other things like a hunting lodge. So this station had to be rescued by the National Park Service and was split into two, put on a barge and moved 30 miles up, and was brought right to this beach and planted with a crane right where we are now. And when it was put here in 1978, it was pretty much right on the water.
Okay.
And the dune has grown up since 1978 in this location. So we feel like we're far away, but we're pretty close.
So is this the last remaining life-saving station on Cape
There's
Cod?
actually two left from that time period. Another one is in private hands and is a very popular nightclub, bar, restaurant.
So we want to know about how well they did. Were there saves? Did they do well on that?
Absolutely. Hundreds of sailors were saved over a 60-year period during the worst time of the shipwrecks. There were some losses, and those were usually with storms that were so horrific they couldn't rescue. They would try. There was also some loss of life from the lifesavers themselves as well during the rescues.
But it was, they were very brave men. I mean, what was the saying? You have to go out, you don't have to come back. And they had to prove for the official records of the keeper and everything that they had tried every means in their power to save the shipwreck. So if they went out in the boat and that didn't work, then they would come back and do the beach apparatus drill. And if they couldn't go out in the boat on their first attempt because the seas were too high, they would wait a little bit and go out again in a couple of hours when the tide changed. Like, they were focused on saving those lives.
So you think about the worst storm you can think of if you're from the coast and the waves are crashing and it's really windy or snowing, and those were the times they actually had to go to work. So it was even just to walk the beach or to pull the beach cart or to pull the surf boat along the beach to get to the wreck site was hazardous in itself. There may not be enough beach. So it was, think about the worst weather, and then you had to go out. So.
Well, I did some research that the Coast Guard was actually in the 1700s, right? So why wasn't the Coast Guard here? Do you know that?
So it was it's a name thing. The early lifesavers was the Life-Saving Service, and then the name changed to the United States Coast Guard in 1915.
Okay, so they were the
15.
Okay.
Precursors,
Yeah, that's very cool. So do we have any lifesaver families that still live in the area?
Yeah, we have volunteers, Dick and Pat Ryder, and they are out here all during the summer. We have an open house in the museum every day in the middle of the day. And then we also do a demonstration of the beach apparatus drill when they would have to fire the line out to the ship so they could zip line them back. We do that on Thursday evenings. So the riders are involved in all of that. They do a couple of shifts on the museum desk. They come in on Thursday nights to volunteer for the beach apparatus drill. And on a regular basis, Mr. Ryder is like emailing me and saying, hey, I found this other new article that like a relative of mine found, because his father was a surfman in the life-saving service in Chatham, where this station came from. So he'll let us know if he finds new resources or if he uncovers diaries. He's always looking out for things of that time period related to life-saving stations that he can send us.
So he is sort of an historian, right?
Yeah, he is actually part of a group called the Life-Saving Station Heritage Association, and every year they have a conference in a different life-saving station somewhere else in the United States, because even though it was a big deal right here in between all the boats that were going like from Boston to New York, there are life-saving stations on the Great Lakes in Michigan. There are life-saving stations on the California coast near San Francisco. So there are life-saving stations all over this country.
So this is a point of pride for this community.
Yes.
This was something pretty good. So you talked about shooting the line out to the ships. How did they do that?
Well, they had a special little cannon made, and this was developed at the Springfield Armory, another national park site. And they came up with the best trajectory and the muzzle speed and the piston fit of the shot. And so there's a lot of physics involved and technology. So that thing can fire over 1,000 yards, and it fires a line. And then you try to calculate the height and how it's going to fall on the shipwreck, which might be several hundred yards offshore. And then you have to calculate, when you pull the line tight to get the zip line ready, how much of a sag that might be, and you have to determine how thick the line is. There's different thicknesses you could use, and if the line's wet, it sags more. So, and the wind and which way the wind's going. So
Wow.
it was really a scientific process of trajectory, height, the technology of the cannon, the lines, the friction, all that.
So these surfmen, is that what you call them, were physicists? Had to be maybe some biology things in there too, because we have a lot of sand here. So there had to be erosion issues. These were sort of like all around smart guys who were willing to give their lives to save others.
And physically fit. They were, if they weren't upkeeping the life-saving station or doing constant drills to be prepared whenever that moment came that they needed to head out, then they were exercising. Yeah, they did a lot of hard manual labor.
And they didn't have the technology, so we're thinking cell phones, GPS technology, satellite imagery to try to help find a shipwreck or a rescue. They didn't have any of that communication, any of that technology to find or map or locate things. And then when they had to take the big boat out to try to rescue them, that was a horse-drawn boat. So, and then when they're pulling the lines tight for the zip line to come back, that's all done with block and tackle. So low technology, didn't have the power winches, any of that stuff.
Right, a lot of simple machines that were used together. So I would assume, and I don't have the knowledge of this, that a lot of shipwrecks took place at night because they couldn't see where they were going. So
And in the winter.
And in the winter. So how did they go about finding these? Like, we didn't have sonar, we didn't have the mapping.
So they literally just, like Aleutia was saying, they would walk on the beach, patrols at night. And then during the day, they rely on the lookout tower. And so stations every 5 miles, you got a lookout tower during the day. And you have surfmen walking on the beach with lanterns, and they have flares if they saw a wreck.
Okay.
And then that would tell the people in the shipwreck, hey, you've been spotted. And then they're going to but the wrecks didn't occur in front of the station usually. You'd hope they might, but it might be 2 miles down the beach during a storm in loose sand to take the cart. So
if a surfman saw something suspicious or wreck, he would shoot a flare, which would also alert the other surfmen, right, that were walking back and forth. Wow. So that's just a lot of minds on all the time.
Yeah.
Like, obviously they had to sleep. They probably slept in shifts, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
But they had to be on it all the time, much like firemen today. So I have a STEM challenge for you. As you know, kids, we like to get you involved in the national park. So knowing all that you know about this life-saving station and the physical fitness that people had to have to do this, their dedication, their compassion for saving others, we want you to adopt that same type of mindset. And I want you to create some life-saving apparatus that you can use for water rescue where you live. So it could be used at a local pool, a lake, if you live on the beach. Now, I don't want it to be just the same old, same old. I want you to think out of the box and come up with an idea where you can create the life-saving device that could be embedded into swimwear. It could be right on the side of the beach where you could grab it and go. We want you to come up with your prototype. We want you to do 3 things with it. I want you to use recyclable materials to create it. I want you to be very eco-friendly in your design. So the prototype can be recyclable materials, but we also want you to be able to tell us what you would use in the real design. And then we want it to be cheap enough that others can replicate this. So if we have people in other countries that need life-saving devices for water rescue, they can replicate your design. You're going to share this on social media at hashtag expeditionsineducation and hashtag natparkchallenge. Don't forget to tag me at Dacia92. So we have had just a really great time talking about this place. Now, I got a challenge for you. So a lot of these kids, and we're talking about 750,000 that watch these, they're interested in the national parks now. Like, they want your jobs. And can you give them just one little piece of advice? If you can just talk right in the camera for this one. What could they do now to get themselves prepared?
Convince the adults around them to take them to authentic historical sites like historic buildings or homes, and convince those adults to take them out into big nature. We can all find great nature in just our city parks, etc., but get out and spend big chunks of a day or go camping in big nature.
What about you, Bill?
Well, I think you have to believe in what you have a passion for, and you don't need special training to work in national parks. I've known people who have been drama, theater people who have entered the Park Service and have been very effective at being educators and inspiring people. So you have to believe in what your passions are and that you can apply them to certain types of jobs in the national parks.
So Bill, that sort of goes back to our motto for this, is we want this to be our passion intersects our purpose. And if you can do that, then your job is going to become just more of your lifestyle and you're going to enjoy it and want to get up every day. So thank you so much for joining us today, Ranger Aleutia and Ranger Bill at the Cape Cod Life-Saving Station Museum outside of Provincetown, Massachusetts at the Cape Cod National Seashore. This is Dr. Drizzle, out.